All right, welcome back. Just breezing through hour two here, kicking it off. Roger Stone hung around with us for two segments. And from one great patriot to another, we're joined every Friday by Michael Johns. He's one of the founders of the Tea Party movement. He's also a former speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush and a great friend of the show. Michael Johns joins us again with Frank Morano. Hey, guys, how are you?
John, Frank, how you guys doing?
Good.
Doing great.
So, Mike, everybody's putting out their own versions of timelines here and everything else. I know you've got a pretty strong one, and it kind of lays out, if you ask me objectively, that Trump was, ahead of the WHO and what China was telling everyone. Trump took all kinds of actions. What does the timeline look like that you put together?
Yeah, I think we look at things as of today. I mean, it appears by every metric that we are starting to make our way out of the woods here. I think we've had 7-day rolling averages on coronavirus fatalities dropping. You have the testing obviously increasing, and now you have Dr. Fauci, others coming out and saying that these indefinite lockdowns have actually simply on a public health basis are unproductive. So even discounting obviously the fact that we've lost 39 million jobs and have taken an extraordinary, almost unprecedented, I assume unprecedented hit to our economy, that's happening. So if you walk through this is what's intriguing to me is sadly we're in a political year. And we are, as we get through this, I think there's going to be a lot of retrospection about the president's management of it. And what's impressive to me is, number one, to the extent that any fingers want to be pointed, and we are simply human creatures in an uncertain world. I mean, it's entirely conceivable that there is no singular point of failure or error here, but if you were going to identify them, that would be the World Health Organization, which misguided us all the way up to mid-January about the transmittability of this. And then also, obviously, the Communist Party of China, which did the same, apparently, it appears to be with the World Health Organization. But then when you get into the timeline, John, I mean, it's really unbelievable. So you have China on December 31, really for the first time acknowledging what I think U.S. intelligence and global clinical sources outside of the World Health Organization knew, and that was that this was transmittable, that it did represent a pandemic threat, and the president goes immediately sort of into action. I mean, January 3 days later, we request entry for the CDC into China, and China denies it. On the 6th, long before the travel ban was put into effect, the administration puts in the travel warning to China. You have a day later on the 7th. Realize the first case doesn't emerge in the United States until January 19th. The first death we thought was on February 29th. That's been moved up a bit now based on an autopsy that suggests February 6th. All these actions predate even one singular case in this country. So you have a coronavirus incident management system put together on the 7th, which basically allows clinicians, hospitals, ERs, nursing homes to input data so that we can essentially assess some of these trends. The 17th, we have he puts into place public screening at the three airports where most of the major inbound traffic from China was occurring in San Francisco, LAX in Los Angeles, and JFK in New York. And then on the 20th, NIH begins work on both commercial and governmental focus on vaccinations.
Michael, if I may, and I appreciate that comprehensive timeline there. It's certainly very interesting. And it would be interesting to watch a similar timeline of media criticism through that, all the dates that you just mentioned. But we're all eager, I think, wherever people fall in the political persuasion on the political spectrum, we're all eager to get this economy up and running again and get things turned around. I'm curious as to your analysis of the best way to do that. The House has passed this bill, which the Senate seems to be greeting with a tremendous lack of enthusiasm, which includes direct payments to Americans and direct aids to cities and states, along with a bunch of other things. What kind of, the Senate indicated, Chuck Grassley indicated that they're going to consider some sort of coronavirus stimulus bill the second or third week in June, in all likelihood. What would you like to see Congress do, if anything, in terms of stimulative action?
Well, the single most, firstly, the president's indicated that he's going to focus a lot on deregulation and on making it easier for companies and businesses to function. Some of those have already been eased through this period and will be continued. Some new ones will be identified. Every federal department and agency has been charged with identifying what can be done there. That, to me, makes sense. There's no direct cost to the federal government or the American taxpayers for deregulating our economy in this period of transition back to normalcy. Number two, we've talked about it before, but I think you've got to push hard on this payroll tax cut, and that is particularly for low and middle income workers who are still attached to their jobs. The most obvious stimulative effect that you can take, that again requires no allocation of federal dollars, is to relieve the both employers and the employees of that burden, and allow them to keep more of what they actually earn. And then as far as liquidity issue goes, I think it generally makes sense that, particularly in states and regions that have been hit hard, that incentives for employers to continue to meet their payrolls make sense. Meaning you want relief bill that is targeted, not just a blanket, on like Pelosi's putting together now. And you want it to be temporary. Meaning we don't want this evolving into some New Deal phenomenon. And then finally, I think as you suggested, we don't want to have a stimulus bill that actually provides a disincentive for the American people to work.
Well, that kind of, Mike, I'm sorry to interrupt, but, I was talking to a friend who's a business owner today, and he was saying, look, I laid some people off, I furloughed some people, then I got a PPP loan, okay, and my employees are basically like, I don't really want to come back, because they're actually, with this new stimulus plan, they're actually getting more money take home than they were from a job where they were getting paid $50,000 a year. So, there's small businesses that have to spend this money on payroll now to get it forgiven, but the employees don't want to come back because the PPP is the unemployment is overpaying them. So it's got small businesses in deeper trouble here.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of put a few things together here. We increased the unemployment compensation. We put into place the tax, so-called tax payment. You add it all up, in a good number of cases, for employees that were making under $75,000 a year, or in a family under $150,000 a year, they've ended up financially better off. Now, presumably offset by other financial burdens that have arisen, because there's kind of a cumulative snowball effect of all this throughout the economy. But the key here is to make sure, and I think this administration is committed to that with this particular package, that it does not continue to provide those sort of disincentives, because ultimately the key to getting the economy back to work is getting the American workers back to work and getting productivity put in place across industry lines. Now, some of these industries have been hit harder than others. Some of them have almost irreparable damage. These are not industries we want to see go away in the United States or see swept up in foreign competition necessarily. It's reasonable to look at industry specific things, but this is always the danger in these sort of situations, is that these issues are these programs are put together with such speed, and with quite often such obvious politicization, that
They don't
yourself-
consider the collateral effects of it, and now we
Yeah.
got, we basically have government money working against government money, and it's making things even more complicated. But Mike, thanks for breaking it down for us. He's always there for us. Michael Johns.
Thank you guys. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Enjoy the holiday.
See you, Mike.
Enjoy your holiday there, Frank.
Former speechwriter for George H.W. Bush, one of the founders of the Tea Party movement, and regular contributor right here on Liquid Lunch. We're going to take a quick break. Frankie and I are going to come back after this with model and actress north of the border in Canada. Zen Sams joins us right after this.